Alright, so this is the BBK Underdrive Pulley kit that's on our crank pulley. It's a pretty simple kit. Basically, it's an aluminum pulley that bolts to the crank and lines up with the belt and then moves the damper further out and then bolts the damper to the front of it. The reason they did it, it's pretty obvious, is it's a cheap part to make. They just literally machine this on a lathe, basically. And then you can bolt this to it. They don't have to worry about actually building a damper. That's why this kit is pretty affordable. I like this kit, but also it's a very short-term use kit in my opinion. And so I'm going to go over the little things that are kind of wrong with it. First off, the belt doesn't really like the surface of the aluminum. I noticed that on the water pump and the alternator pulley. It would kind of squeal a little bit every now and then. Kind of depends, but I could tell it was doing something because the belt was turning silver from taking off aluminum material. And then you don't really gain a whole lot with it. I like it just because it kind of gives that motor a little bit of a lighter feel. It starts to tilt the engine in the direction of, you know, putting aluminum rods in the motor, but definitely not nearly as significant of a weight change as that. And then also the weight's not too terribly different because you have this giant damper stabbed on top of it. So it's actually a little heavier, but the rotational mass on the belt is a little smaller. The fact that you're having to still rotate this whole thing, you know, kind of has an effect still. So it's not, honestly, you're really not gaining much at all doing this. You know, I just liked it because I thought it was a pretty cool, interesting setup. Also, the pulley inner diameter here is a little bit too big. So when you go to put it on the car, it'll slide right on. Whereas this one, you kind of have to press it in place, and then really nice dampers, you have to actually have an installation tool to press them onto the front of the crank. Having that loose isn't really good for it. It puts a lot of stress on the keyway. I don't really see very much keyway wear, but this, I'm sorry, my camera's all messed up. I'm looking for it. But this pulley wasn't really in there for very long. I do see a little bit what looks like the keyway was pressing. So, you know, you have a little bit of that going on. And then the worst thing, though, in my opinion, of this is the fact that it's aluminum. If you can see that groove right there. So if you can feel a groove with your fingernail, it's probably going to leak oil. So that's kind of a rule of thumb. Oil can fit into that like 20 thousandths of space. 20 thousandths is about as thick as a fingernail. 20, 30 thousandths, somewhere in there. Please excuse the airplanes above my house. But yeah, so you can leak oil through that. Like that right there will start to seep oil, and eventually it'll cut through enough that it will really start to leak oil. So again, this is kind of a short-term use kit. I would buy this kit if I was building like a little track racer car or drift car that was going to get beat up and taken apart and put back together a ton of times, and maybe even replace this pulley every now and then. Something that you're just kind of being mean to, don't really care about, and it's short-term builds for cheap racing applications. This will probably help a little bit. You know, it's an underdrive kit. You still get some power, mechanical drag out of the motor by using this kit. I think I never really like sat down and tested all that. That would require some pretty hefty testing equipment to get accurate numbers on that. But I like the way it felt in the car. But it has come to the end of its life, being that it's starting to cut that groove, and we're also changing setups on the car. So for the supercharger, I want the larger crank pulley for the supercharger speed. If you run an underdrive pulley on a supercharger, you're killing your supercharger pulley ratio. So that's pretty much it. Long story short, stick with if you want a really nice damper, I would just buy the expensive approved ones that are smaller. You can get underdrive sizes.